Some of the other side effects of things that neo-feminism propagates is the types of negative repercussions that we're seeing in things like social media, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Pinterest, etc. Social media is furthering the agenda to create division between men and women. And I mean, you could see these types of arguments and thread and flame wars all over social media. Many conditioned women are now employing social media as a mechanism for what I call collecting men. Okay, they're basically creating like shopping lists of men to find out what they can do for them and how much attention that they can garner from them. They often will, this inauthentic form of woman will actually view men as a commodity on a grocery item checklist and view the social media outlet that she's using to do this and to get these things done for her as like a shopping venue, like going into a store. Social media websites have further been employed to destroy real social interaction. This is the main thing that they're being used to do in this agenda. You know, you're not having people meet in person anymore. They're just talking online. And, you know, they're not actually developing real social interactive skills. You know, they're just interacting virtually. And it's done to destroy real social interaction between people, especially men and women. And also this, the secondary effect that this has is it emboldens rudeness between people. Because the way people talk to each other online, they would never talk to each other like that in person, you know. They would definitely think twice about it, you know, doing that, you know, physically right in front of another person. There's little incentive, very little incentive to be nice to somebody when you can get away with saying anything in the virtual online world. This is part of how women are using social media and part of some of the ancillary effects that social media is having in the form of driving a wedge between men and women. The so-called millennials, the millennial generation, the millennial, quote, woman, these are the children of the post-baby boomer generation and were largely raised by state-run educational system, television, and pop culture. They've been conditioned by these systems to behave in ways that are complacent, compliant, unquestioning, unthinking, and narcissistic. They absorb large amounts of television programming, consume poisonous genetically modified food, are obsessed with escapist pursuits, and can only have vapid, inane conversations and express an extreme lack of concern or interest in real-world issues. They are the absolute dream of the social engineer controllers. The reason I brought this up is because I've had a little bit of interaction with millennial women over the last few years, and when I see women of this age group, they're all sadly, very sadly, almost universally alike in the patterns of behavior and the tendencies that they express. I actually had a young woman just pre-college age, like maybe senior in high school age, like 17, 18 years old, say to me, directly to my face in person, I would prefer that someone else do my thinking for me. Actually made that statement to my face. You know, this is how conditioned they have this younger generation. This is what the school system is doing to young people, especially young women. It's seen as uncool to care about anything serious, any topic that is serious. The conversation has to be as inane as humanly possible as it can be made, particularly among this generational group. There's a common phrase in America, in Western culture in particular, that ignorance is bliss. I've said before, ignorance is death. It'll lead to our destruction. But in the ancient Egyptian tradition or the Kemetic tradition, there was a common phrase about ignorance, and it said, ignorance is evil. It is the essence of evil to ignore truth. And I couldn't agree with that statement more. The consciousness of the so-called millennial woman has been programmed from birth by the state thanks to the complacency of their parents' generation, a generation largely that surrendered their freedom, abandoned health and nutrition for quote-unquote convenience, traded their spiritual and moral values for those that they garnered from sitcom television, and handed their children over to the corporatized state where their minds were molded like clay into the types of inauthentic males and inauthentic females that we're discussing here today. Another technique that is being employed, particularly on the religious side of this agenda, because again, there's a political side to this agenda, a social side to the agenda, and a religious side to this agenda, is called neo-puritanicalism. And this is rampant in our society. It's a very, very unhealthy attitude toward human sexuality. A religious puritanical mindset is being slowly reinfused into Western culture by religious fundamentalism. Such religionists are demonizing consensual sexual relationships between adults and pushing the notion that normal human sexuality is somehow sinful or even evil. They try to convince people that everyone in American culture is obsessed with sex, when in fact, all people in American culture are obsessed with is the idea of sex, but not the act itself. This is due to the level of sexual repression that is taking place within our culture. Every westernized culture is actually more sexually repressed now than ever before in its history. And this dynamic is becoming worse and worse due to the growing influence of this neo-puritanical ideology. This religious and cultural engineering to demonize a healthy attitude toward normal human sexuality, this is religious and cultural engineering to demonize a healthy attitude toward normal human sexuality and to reduce the human population through voluntary abstinence. Now again, don't twist my words and make it into something extreme that I'm not saying. I'm not telling people go out and have rampant, wild, promiscuous sex with everyone indiscriminately. I'm just saying that the attitude toward a healthy libido and a healthy sex life is constantly repressed in our culture. And this is it's a fundamentalist religious influence. I could tell you a little anecdote about this story. A while back, someone, I can't remember where it was or who said it to me, but I was in a discussion with a woman, and she said something to the effect that for women to have any kind of a healthy sex life that is not deliberately being withheld by them, okay, is akin to someone standing outside of a bakery and giving cakes away for free, and how would the people who own the bakery feel about that? Now think about that for a minute. Think about that anecdote for a minute. She said women having sex and having a healthy sex life is very much like somebody standing outside of a bakery giving away free cake. Okay? Now think about how unhealthy of an attitude that is about the normal human sexual experience that is supposed to be about bonding with another person, emotions shared between another person, physicality shared between another person. All they're thinking of it as it's some type of a monetary exchange, or it's some type of a thing where you could be so shamed for doing it. It's like you're giving away the goods for free instead of getting something in return, and you're devaluing it for all of us. Now that's more of again, a financial motivation for the withholding of sex, but this goes hand in hand with the neo-puritanical religious worldview that sex should just be continuously withheld. And it's something that is something that, should only be done for things like procreation. Again, I don't have a wild, radical sexual view about that it should be done completely indiscriminately. There is obviously emotions tied in with the act, but to view this in the total biblical sense as something that should be viewed as sinful is definitely part of the neo-feminist agenda and part of a religious fundamentalist agenda that ties in with the neo-feminist agenda. It's all there for population control ultimately. Hand in hand with neo-puritanicalism goes the myth of hookup culture. And this is completely fake. It does not exist. It does not exist anywhere on the planet. Okay? It's an invention. This is the idea that that is brought up by the mind-controlled religionists, the radical Christian right, the fake Christian religionists. They spread this notion that hookup culture exists and is rampant in our society. And what they claim it is an atmosphere of total promiscuity, total one-night stands, and total casual sex going around everywhere in our culture. That Americans are totally obsessed with sex and are having it randomly and indiscriminately everywhere. Okay? I don't know how many people here have experienced what is known as hookup culture. If you've actually experienced hookup culture, raise your hand. A couple of people, like a couple of people. Maybe 5 or 6 people in the entire room. Okay? I'm saying it's such a limited thing that it is practically non-existent. This is an invention. They're taking small isolated pockets where some promiscuity might take place, and they're saying, this is going on everywhere, and everybody's doing it, and it's a rampant problem throughout society. If anything, attitudes about sex are becoming increasingly more repressed day after day in this culture. Okay? And people make a radically wild, bigger deal about it than it is. Okay? They're not looking at it indiscriminately and not looking at it frivolously at all. Hookup culture is an invention of the religion and social engineering to make religious-minded people believe that there is a wild sex-crazed culture that they are being protected from, or that they need protection from, by buying into their puritanical religious ideology. This is what the agenda really is doing. And again, this is all to get people to think about normal sexual activity in a completely unhealthy and repressed way. So that what ultimately happens is you end up with population reduction voluntarily conducted by the population that the eugenics agenda is designed to cull, getting the herd to cull itself. Hand in hand with the fallacy of hookup culture is the fallacy of rape culture. So-called rape culture is also a psyop invention and is not actually taking place. This is not at all to say that rape does not take place, or it is not an extremely vicious crime and an overall problem in human society. Again, don't take my words out of context and twist them. But the claim that there is a formally justified culture of rape being propped up within our society is patently absurd. If there is any institutionalized acceptance of rape in human culture, it is in the prison system, where the highest number of rapes in America take place, and those rapes take place upon men, not women. That's where the highest number of rapes are taking place on a daily basis in the world, is in the United States prison system. The myth of rape culture is ultimately propagated by the social engineers to keep us in constant fear of each other. Now, once again, you can react viscerally if you want. Of course, does rape take place? Yes, it does. It's a crime that takes place every day. We're not talking about rape. Look at the words on the screen. Rape culture. The question is there a culture, a sanctioned culture of rape in America or any other country for that world? In some Middle Eastern regimes, yeah, there may be. In some radical Islamicist regimes, rape may be officially sanctioned religiously and in law, But I'm talking about in the West. In Western culture, there is no such thing as rape culture. Rape culture in the West is a myth. It's an illusion propagated by neo-feminists, okay? It's done to propagate fear. Again, this is all about fear of normal human sexual interaction. This is the theme here in this section. Propagate fear of normal sexual activity, okay? You get people in fear, they start procreating less, the population is reduced, you're seeing less of the traits that you don't want to see in the culture. This is done to keep us in constant fear of each other. It drives the wedge between the genders. For example, the phrase that you hear by a lot of neo-feminists, every man is a potential rapist. I mean, this is the most ridiculous, nonsensical thing I've ever heard in my life. And it's man-hating. I mean, that's blatant misandry, blatant man-hatred. And all it does is further isolate the genders, creating the further war, divide in the gender war.